the artist formerly known as Terence Trent D'Arby.
He was being pursued by the paparazzi a lot.
What do you think about the comparisons that have been made about you and with Prince and people like that?
In 1988, a 25-year-old kid from Florida stood on the Grammy stage and beat Michael Jackson. Not in some minor category nobody remembers. He took Best Male R&B Vocal Performance right out of the King of Pop's hands. His debut album had already spent 9 weeks at #1 in the UK, outselling Bad, 12 million copies worldwide. Critics were calling him the greatest voice since Sam Cooke. Prince treated him like a little brother. The whole industry was on notice. And then, almost overnight, the music stopped.
Really, very closely. I mean, it's not the first time you've seen it, is it?
It's the first time I've seen it in about 3 months.
Do you see new things in it after 3 months, things that you didn't spot before?
I think every time.
Not because the talent left, it never left, but because the machine that built him decided he wasn't playing the game the right way. He made an album they didn't understand, said things they couldn't forgive, and refused to shrink into the box they'd built for him. So they pulled the support, pulled the promotion, and watched him fall. What came next was 12 years of silence, a breakdown so deep he says he psychologically died at 27, and a decision most people still don't understand. He legally erased his own name, killed off the person the world knew, and became someone else entirely just to survive. This is the story of Terence Trent D'Arby, the superstar who had to destroy himself to keep living.
Whip them up to a frenzy a little bit.
It's quite fun. It's sort of, you get bored and you figure, what can I do today? So you figure, well, I've got a good quote, why don't I just wind up the press some more? It's quite fun.
Before he was any of that, before the Grammys and the headlines, and the 12 million records, he was just a kid in a preacher's house in DeLand, Florida, trying to figure out which version of himself the world wanted him to be. Born March 15th, 1962, in Manhattan, to a mother named Frances Howard, who sang gospel and taught school and loved hard. His biological father was a married man he never knew, a question mark where a foundation should have been. By the time he was 11, the family had moved south to DeLand, where the heat stuck to your skin and everybody knew your business. His mother married Bishop James Benjamin D'Arby, a Pentecostal minister with a firm handshake and a past he didn't talk about much. The boy took the bishop's name, added an apostrophe later, because even then, he wanted to make things his own. What most folks don't know is that Bishop D'Arby used to play guitar, played it well too, before he got the calling and traded his 6-string for a pulpit. That detail matters, because years later, Sananda Maitreya would reflect that his whole life had been about fulfilling 2 dreams at once. His mother's vision of a polished performer, and his father's buried hunger to be a rock star. 2 parents, 2 blueprints, 1 kid caught in between. The Pentecostal church gave him his voice. If you've ever been in one of those services, you know. The music doesn't politely suggest you feel something. It grabs you by the chest and shakes you until you do. Frances sang in the choir. The boy absorbed every run, every shout, every moment where the spirit hit, and the room went electric. When critics later compared him to Sam Cooke, they weren't wrong about the vocal DNA. They just didn't realize how deep the roots went. But the church couldn't hold all of him. By 18, he'd won the Florida Golden Gloves lightweight boxing championship. Before this man ever stepped into a recording studio, he was stepping into a ring, fists wrapped, jaw set, learning how to take a hit and keep moving forward. He briefly enrolled at the University of Central Florida to study journalism, because some part of him understood the power of a story well told. But school wasn't it. Nothing in DeLand was big enough for what was building inside him. So he did what a lot of young black men did back then, when they had too much fire to sit still. He joined the army, and the army sent him to Germany, and Germany changed everything. He was stationed with the 3rd Armored Division near Frankfurt, Elvis Presley's old unit, which is the kind of poetic detail you couldn't make up. But unlike Elvis, Terence Trent D'Arby didn't come to Germany to serve quietly and go home. He came to serve, and then the music found him. And after that, the army never really had him again. He joined a funk band called The Touch while still on active duty, playing clubs off base, singing to crowds of soldiers and locals who didn't care about rank or regulation, just whether the man on the mic could move them. And he could. The problem was, the gigs kept getting better, and the discipline kept getting worse. He went AWOL enough times that the military finally did what the military does: court-martial, dishonorable discharge. At 21, he walked out with no degree, no safety net, and a record that would follow most men into a dead end. In Germany, he met a manager named Klaus-Peter Schleinitz, who schooled him on the deep history of soul music and helped him understand where his voice actually came from. By the time D'Arby left for London in 1986, he wasn't imitating anyone. He was becoming something the British press had never quite seen: a black American who could sing like a Pentecostal preacher, move like a boxer, talk like a journalist, and dress like he owned every room he walked into. CBS Records UK signed him. He linked up with producer Martin Ware, co-founder of the Human League and Heaven 17, and together they built a debut album that sounded like nothing else on the radio. And before that album even dropped, D'Arby did something that showed either supreme confidence or supreme recklessness. He told British journalists flat out that his record was better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The quote went everywhere. He'd later admit the truth with a grin. He never believed the comparison, but he knew it would sell. "All I was doing," he said, "was my Muhammad Ali impression." On July 13, 1987, Introducing the Hardline According to Terence Trent D'Arby went straight to #1 in the UK and sold 1 million copies in 3 days. It would eventually move over 12 million worldwide, spend 9 weeks at the top of the British charts, 4 more than Michael Jackson's Bad, and produce 4 charting singles. Wishing Well climbed the Billboard Hot 100 for 17 weeks before reaching #1 on May 7, 1988, the longest rise to the summit since Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams. In February, he took home the Brit Award for International Breakthrough Act. He was 25. 12 months earlier, nobody outside of a Frankfurt funk club knew his name. Now, the whole world was watching, and the world had opinions. At the 31st Annual Grammy Awards in February 1989, inside the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, he stood among the biggest names in music: Jackson, Prince, Whitney, all in the same room, and walked away with the trophy for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance. He'd also been nominated for Best New Artist, which went to Jody Watley, but the R&B win was the one that mattered. That was Michael Jackson's category, and a 26-year-old from DeLand, Florida with 1 album took it from him. Rolling Stone's Michael Gilmore called him a magnificent and rousing vocalist, but D'Arby was already pushing back against the frame. "Why is it," he asked, "if I go on stage and do songs by both Sam Cooke and the Rolling Stones, I'm cited only as being derivative of Cooke, but not as an emulator of Mick Jagger?" He wasn't wrong. The industry wanted to love him, but only inside a lane it had already drawn. Off stage, things moved just as fast. He'd formed a genuine bond with Prince. Real warmth, not industry politeness. He kissed Prince on the forehead the first time they met, spent hours on the phone with him, trusted him enough to make him godfather to his daughter, Serafina, born December 1988. "He embraced me as a little brother," D'Arby would say later. "A great master and a mentor who I always made a point of deferring to." They even recorded together in the early 90s, though the track was never released. Apparently, they fell out over his use of an 11th chord, which is about the most Prince reason imaginable to end a studio session. The friendship survived, the song didn't, but fame was already pulling at the seams. In February 1988, News of the World ran a headline about his affair with Paula Yates, Bob Geldof's wife, and the racial framing was ugly. Bob's Paula caught with Black Star. Yates later told him the scandal had virtually destroyed his career in certain circles. His daughter's christening that year tells you exactly where he stood in the culture. The godparents were Prince, Miles Davis, Pete Townshend, and Chrissie Hynde. That's not a guest list. That's a coronation roster. But coronations come with targets. The label had one request, and it was the one thing he refused to do. Columbia Records sat him down and laid it out plain. All you've got to do is make a Sam Cooke record and we'll give you the world. To a lot of artists, that would have sounded like a gift. To Darby, it sounded like a cage. What makes you think just because he's one of my gods, I'm trying to be him? He said. I want to go past him. Then he went into the studio and proved he meant it. He wrote every song, produced every track, arranged every note. What came out was nothing the label expected. Spoken word interludes over ambient textures, psychedelic soul that drifted and swelled like a fever dream, classical strings where they wanted funk guitar. The album opened with near silence before a poetry recitation. No obvious singles, no radio-ready hooks, no Sam Cooke safety net. He'd given them a piece of art when they asked for a product. On October 23, 1989, neither fish nor flesh arrived, and the numbers told a brutal story. Number 12 in the UK, down from number 1. 61 in the States, down from 4. 2 million copies worldwide against 12 million for the debut. That's an 80% crash, the kind that doesn't just slow a career, but reshapes how the entire industry sees you. Columbia, according to Darby, withdrew nearly all promotional support once they realized the album wasn't what they'd ordered. Frank Farian, yes, the Milli Vanilli guy, made things worse by releasing unauthorized 1984 recordings weeks before the new album dropped, flooding the market with inferior material at the worst possible moment. The press flipped. An old NME quote resurfaced like a weapon. I'm a genius, point blank. And suddenly that was the whole story. He named the double standard years later in classic pop. They wanted me to be the nice, polite black kid. But really, I was just a clown trying to draw attention to the work. In the wreckage, he turned to Miles Davis, his daughter's godfather. Miles listened, then cut straight through. Don't ever ask me what I think of your work. You tell me what you think of it. Truest advice anyone ever gave him, but it couldn't stop what was coming. In his telling, there was a shadow over his career that had a name: Michael Jackson. Darby would later claim that Jackson used his influence at Sony to compromise his path, that the king of pop refused to physically acknowledge him when they met. I just had the misfortune of being in the shadow of Zeus, he told The Times in 2021. We didn't get along, and he was to me. But here's what's important, and what Darby himself has been honest about. He can't prove it. I don't have any empirical evidence that I can point to in a court of law, he told HuffPost. Whether Jackson actively worked against him or whether the industry simply didn't have room for two black men reaching for the same pop throne, that question remains open. What Darby believed was structural. There just wasn't enough room for another black superstar operating in the realm of poppy, soulful R&B. He told the Irish Times. He called it a limited plinth. He believed he got pushed off it. What we know for certain is what happened next. In 1993, Symphony or Damn earned 5 stars from Q magazine, peaked at number 4 in the UK, and featured Delicate with Desiree, a song that should have reintroduced him to the world. But the commercial momentum was gone. 2 years later, Vibrator came and went quietly, his last album for Columbia. The relationship had strained past repair. He signed with Java Records, recorded an entire album called Solar Return, and the label shelved it. Never released. He bought it back with his own money and walked away from the major label system for good. By then, something deeper than a career was breaking. It felt like I was going to join the 27 Club, he told the New Statesman. And psychologically I did, because that is exactly the age I was when I was killed. Not alcohol. He was clear about that. The PTSD can strike at any time. I can't blame alcohol. This was the slow collapse of a man whose identity had been built by an industry that no longer wanted him, wearing a name that no longer felt like his own. And in a quiet apartment somewhere between Los Angeles and Oblivion, he started having dreams about someone else. The dreams started in 1995. A name kept appearing, night after night. Sananda Maitreya. Sanskrit, translating roughly to possessed of happiness and friendly, benevolent. He didn't go looking for it. The name found him, the way a song finds you in the middle of the night when you weren't trying to write one. For 6 years, he carried it quietly. He was still showing up when people called. In 1999, he sang lead for INXS at the opening of Stadium Australia, filling the space left by Michael Hutchence, another friend the industry had swallowed whole. That same year, he played Jackie Wilson in a CBS miniseries. There's something almost unbearable about that image. A man in the middle of losing himself, being asked to become somebody else, always filling another man's shoes, never standing in his own. On October 4th, 2001, he signed the papers. Terence Trent D'Arby, the name on 12 million records, the Grammy, every headline that ever praised him and everyone that tried to bury him, was legally dead. His statement read like a eulogy. Terence Trent D'Arby was dead. He watched his suffering as he died a noble death. After intense pain, I meditated for a new spirit, a new will, a new identity. The world called it a breakdown. He called it survival. When you have a psyche that's no longer functional, he told the Irish Times, you petition another psyche. You either die, you kill yourself, or you think, no, I've got more to do. He released Wildcard that year as his first independent album, initially as a free download. Moved to Munich, then Milan, where he married Francesca Francone, an Italian architect and journalist whose mother's first reaction was apparently, over my dead body. He probably has girlfriends everywhere. But Francesca saw what the industry never looked for, the person underneath the persona. 2 sons followed, Francesco Mingus and Federico Elvis, middle names that were quiet tributes to the jazz and rock royalty their father still carried in his bones. He didn't become famous again. That was never the point. He just needed to become alive. And from that small apartment in Milan, he made music. Not a song here and there. 13 studio albums since 2001, all on his own Treehouse publishing label, most recorded at home with the door closed and no executives on the other end of a phone call. On several of those records, he played virtually every instrument himself. Angels and Vampires was a 40-song double album released across 2005 and 2006. The kind of sprawling, uncompromising work that would have given any major label a panic attack, which is exactly why he made it that way. Nobody to ask where the single was. Nobody to tell him it was too long. Nobody between the music and the man who needed to make it. For a long time, the world didn't notice. But the world has a funny way of circling back to what it should never have walked away from. In 2020, the Avalanches featured him on Reflecting Light, introducing his voice to a generation that had no idea they were hearing a man who once outsold Michael Jackson. In 2022, Calvin Harris sampled a deep cut from the album The World Rejected, giving it a second life on dance floors 30 years later. That same year, Sony released a spatial audio remaster of the debut, credited for the first time to Sananda Maitreya. His condition had always been the same: change the name or don't call. After 20 years, Sony agreed. The entire catalog was renamed. For a man who'd legally buried that identity to save his life, it was more than a business decision. On July 6, 2024, he walked on stage at the Love Supreme Festival in East Sussex, his first UK performance in over 20 years. The voice was still there, not a museum piece, not a nostalgia act, but a living instrument that had kept working even when the spotlight moved on. Standing ovation. Questlove brought him on for a 2-part podcast episode that same month. By late 2025, he was headlining a 9-date UK tour, his first in 23 years, playing Shepherd's Bush Empire backed by a band he called the Sugar Plum Pharaohs. Almost every major peer from his era is gone. Prince, dead at 57. Michael Jackson at 50. George Michael at 53. Whitney Houston at 48. Michael Hutchence at 37. The generation that stood shoulder to shoulder with him on stages and award shows has been almost entirely erased, and the man who walked away, the one the industry forgot, is the one still standing. Almost all of my close peers, he said in 2021, almost all of them are dead. I would not have survived that life. There's a question underneath all of this, and it's the same question that follows almost every black artist who dares to be louder than the room is comfortable with. Darby named it himself in the Times. Oasis were using the same shtick I was. Liam Gallagher took my act. Then he drew the line most people feel, but few say out loud. Compare the treatment of Meghan versus Kate and the treatment I got versus Oasis. The question answers itself. A young black man from Florida tells the press his album is better than Sgt. Pepper, and the industry punishes him for a decade. A young white man from Manchester says the exact same kind of thing every week, and they build a statue. Same confidence, same volume, different consequences. That's not opinion, it's pattern. But here's what the pattern didn't account for. It didn't account for a man who would refuse to die on its terms. Today, Sananda Maitreya has close to 860,000 monthly Spotify listeners, 114,000 YouTube subscribers, 42,000 Instagram followers. Not out of nostalgia, but because he's still creating, still posting, still here. In 2027, Introducing the Hardline turns 40. 40 years since 1 million copies sold in 3 days. 40 years since a court-martialed soldier with a boxer's hands and a preacher's lungs walked into a London studio and made something the world still can't let go of, even after it let go of him. He gave a quote to The Big Issue in 2024 that keeps circling back, almost too simple for everything he's survived. "You don't have to suffer," he said. "You can just choose happiness." That's not denial. That's a man who buried his own name to survive, watched every peer from his generation leave this earth before their time, spent 12 years in what he called hell, and came out the other side in Milan, still singing, still choosing to be here. Terence Trent D'Arby died in 2001. Sananda Maitreya has been alive ever since. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the voice that once outsold the king of pop, coming from a home studio in Italy, singing for no one but himself, sounding like a man who was never going to fit inside anybody else's name.